thank you for joining us on this Thursday morning that feels a bit like a Tuesday, with all the public holidays. I know most clients are away now and things might be a bit quiet, so I think this is the ideal time for us to zoom in on ourselves and focus on our practice. I'm so excited to introduce somebody to you who knows more about financial planning than most of us. Francois du Toit is a powerhouse behind Propulsion, a platform that's all about helping financial planners build stronger businesses, stay ahead of the curve, and connect with each other. With over 25 years in the industry, Francois has worn about every hat there is: advisor, consultant, educator, tech enthusiast, and podcast host. If you haven't yet tuned into his Propulsion Live, you're missing out on a seriously binge-worthy mix of insight, inspiration, and awesome guests, all delivered with Francois' signature energy and sense of humor. Outside of spreadsheets and the strategy sessions, Francois is deeply passionate about uplifting the profession and the people in it. He's a CFP, a practitioner, and just a genuinely awesome human who's all about helping others. I know we're all going to walk away from today with practical and actionable ideas for leveling up our practices. And I highly encourage you to check out Propulsion afterwards if you haven't already. Before I give the mic over to Francois, if you have any questions, please leave them in the question box and we will address them afterwards. Francois, thank you so much for being with us today. The mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. Good morning, everyone. Can I buy that introduction from you? Because I can't even get remotely close to that. Thank you so much. It's really humbling to be welcomed in that way. Thanks, everyone. I see there's some familiar names here, and then there's plenty of people whose names I have not learned yet or got to meet you yet. So, warm good morning. Thank you very much for joining us and for the opportunity. I love this stuff to be really engaging. So if you've got any questions or even differing opinions, or you've experienced something different from what I'm sharing today, please feel free to put that in the chat. I will get to those closer to the end. And but yeah, if there is anything that you want to add to the conversation or questions that you have, please don't miss the opportunity to participate in that way as well. Righty, so let me do, if you're not on mute, you're looking for the screen that you are trying to share. So, so I'm pretty sure we are good to go. So today, talking a little bit about revitalizing your practice. There's lots in here. So some of the things I'm not going to stand still on, and some of the things I am going to stand a little bit more still on. We only have limited amount of time. So I'm going to get straight into it. But there are a few questions that I always try and answer in these sessions. And today I want to talk about not really the financial advisor maturity curve, but rather the 3 different maturity curves that I've come to identify over the years, and how I see these things interplay with each other. How can I find and keep the right clients? This is something that's top of mind for a lot of people. Doesn't matter how long we've been around. What are the best ways to market my practice and on my business? How can technology and automation, that's why I'm probably going to stand still a little bit today. It's sort of my passion. And how can I become more structured and efficient? So we'll see if we get to that last one. We'll see how it goes. But that's what you sort of can expect this morning. So the 3 maturity curves, right? So everybody starts off in the same place when we start. So whether you've been here now for a year or you've been here for 50 years, we all started in the same place. And that's really where we started working on our technical proficiency and our from a professional point of view. And professional sounds like, it's qualifications, all those good things, but obviously it started off with product. So we wanted to talk, we needed to know the product. We needed to know that. Without that, there's not much that we could possibly do. But then that also got us into a sort of a particular focus and a particular rhythm in our businesses. And some people at some stage said, no, there's got to be a better way. And other people said, no, this is the way. And people sort of then started diverging with the way that they run their businesses. But something that I learned very quickly is that unless we build our businesses in a very particular way, we get stuck at some point. And now there's sort of a third layer to this that I'm going to share with you, that if I get stuck there, then I get stuck in my business. I get stuck from a professional point of view, and things just seem to go nowhere. So I'm going to share these 3 curves with you and talk a little bit about them very briefly. But maybe you can identify, oh, maybe there's a thing, or you know what, Francois, I've got these 3 things waxed, let's move on. So that's also very, very cool. Right. So the first one, let me just move the video out of my own way. So the first one is, your own professional development. So this is everything that you need to know in terms of to be able to give advice, basically. So from the product to the technical side, and this is what typically happens, right? We start off with product and we sort of sell. And then at some point we say, no, there's got to be a better way. And then we find out there's something called CFP, and then we do the CFP, and there's a whole new world that opens up for us, and we have new conversations with our clients. And then we get like, no, there needs to be a better way. And then we go and do something else, financial coaching, or, maybe transitionist planning, or whatever, right? And then, there's new value I can add, and there we go. But a lot of people find themselves that I don't have the time to study. I don't have the inclination to study. I'm not in the mood to study anymore. I've been around for too long. But the main reason really being that I just don't have the time. I've got to see my clients. I've got to, write new business. I've got to do those kinds of things. So they get stuck somewhere here. And there's a big reason why we get stuck there. I think a lot of people do make it to, let's call it like NQF6, CFP, those kinds of levels, but they rarely go beyond that. And the biggest reason for that is that unless, I clicked on the wrong side of the slide, unless I do exactly the same thing with my business, and I grow my revenue in a very particular way. I'm going to talk about that quite a bit today. Unless I do that, I'm never going to free myself up to be able to go to the next level professionally. So what that means is that if my business is like, if I'm still doing like, I need new business, there's no ongoing revenue coming into my business that could help me to start focusing on other things. I have to keep chasing clients. I have to manage clients. I have to do all those things. Then you're going to get stuck somewhere here. And I don't think we're going to get further than sort of maybe CFP. And it's just going to feel it's this wheel that keeps on turning. But then also there is a third curve, which is really, really important. And this is from a personal growth point of view. So this is your own personal development. So I'm not talking about the things you need to be able to run a business. I'm not talking about the things that you need to be able to give advice. This is all about your personal growth. How well do you know yourself? How much time are you spending on your mindset, on your health, for those kinds of things, So unless those things are all growing and improving, your business, everything is getting stuck at some point. So even if you try and go all the way professionally, but we're not giving attention to business, you will get stuck. The same thing, if we do everything to build the business, but I don't develop professionally, we will get stuck. I can develop professionally and my business. You're still going to get stuck at some point because you haven't developed yourself personally. And there's a very, very important sort of thing that I believe in, and that is that your business can't grow unless you do. And you need to grow professionally as well as personally, which is very important. And this doesn't matter. I work with people who are literally 65, 66 years old. They are still studying. They are still learning. They attend things. They have conversations about things because they are as excited about what they are doing as they were when they started. So age has got nothing to do with this. How close we are to exiting our businesses have got nothing to do with this. And also it's got nothing to do with where we find ourselves at this point. This is a decision that we make in order to move forward. So I wanted to lead with this because this is really the important part, that without this, none of the stuff I'm going to share with you, you're going to go like, yeah, Francois, I've heard that before. Yeah, Francois, I know. There's a lot of things I'm going to share today that you might know already. But my big question is, are we doing them? Because until I started doing these things in my business, I didn't see anything move. I knew all this stuff, but nothing really happens. And I was always the guy that sat in the audience and went like, no, that's fantastic. I can see, and it makes a lot of sense, but that's not going to work for my business. This is not going to work for my clients are not going to do this. And I've done that plenty of times. And that was probably the biggest reason why I held myself back for many, many years when we got started with the business. And until those things started to change and I started to do the things that work, that's when things started changing. So let's start off with client acquisition and retention. I've got some strategies. Also, I'm going to cut straight to the point, right? I'm not going to fluff things up. So some strategies for finding new clients. And there is just a couple of ways. And I had a very interesting discussion with somebody. Like it's always when I have these sessions, I recently had some interesting discussion with someone, and it's really incredible how these things always seem to work out. But we were talking about, the fact that this person has been around now for a couple of years, 3 years or so, and have to build a business and sort of have kids and a wife and he needs to make this work and all of it. And we were talking around, whether certain strategies would work. And I said to him, look, a lot of these strategies that I believe in are superior to the other things, but they are long-term strategies. They're not a quick fix. So when you need a quick fix, there's things you need to do and things that we've always done before. So some of these principles is not going to change when it comes to business. So the first one is networking, right? And there's different kinds of networking. I think the biggest mistake we make as financial advisors and planners is often to go hang out with other financial advisors and planners more. Not that that's a problem, but we do that more than what we do where we go hang out with where our clients are hanging out. So think about if you go to the to the FPI conference, for example, or you attend any of the events we put on or any of the events that Marius and them put on. If you attend those, it's fantastic because you get to network with your peers and you can have conversations and you can learn what they're doing and all that. But none of them are going to become your client unless your target market is to be an advisor to advisors, right? I mean, I genuinely believe there's an opportunity for that because advisors do need advisors. But that's the important part here. When we network, there's sort of two parts to it. Well, three parts probably. The one is that we need to build professional relationships with other people where we serve our target market. So we have the same target market, but we offer complementary or different services. But there is some form of, not an overlap, but there's something that sort of ties everything together. I mean, that would be relationships that you need to go and build. And the question is, well, where do I find these people, right? It's almost like when you want to recruit, you have to be intentional about it. You have to go and put it out there. And you've got to be very clear around the kinds of people that you want to build this with. So, but I mean, we're typically talking about accountants, lawyers. Some people love working with estate agents. But there are those different kinds of people that you could align yourself with if you wanted. The other thing is then to obviously build a network where you can find clients directly. And there's also many different ways of doing that. I still believe building things like communities are probably one of the best things to do. We'll talk a little bit about that later, I think. But it is really important that we sort of bring our target market together. And often that is through doing all sorts of things like webinars and getting them onto an email list and stuff like that. And these are all things like, but that's what the Americans do. Fully agree, but let me tell you, it works, right? So, but you've got to connect with them and then sort of say, within your network at the moment, isn't there anybody that you can build an even better relationship with so that they are able to refer people to you? And then probably the most underrated networking thing that you can do is to go and attend the events that your clients attend. You've got to find out your target market. For example, if you work with medical professionals, you need to go to the medical professional conferences. You shouldn't be hanging out too much at all the financial planning conferences, right? You should, because one, you need to learn, and two, you probably need CPD. But from a marketing point of view and from a networking point of view, you want to attend the conferences and the events that your ideal client is attending. That's how you get them, right? So think about also, some of you will be involved in sports clubs and hobby things, hobby groups and things like that. That's also where you meet people, right? Because it's people like you and people that you want to work with. And then the fourth one is client events. And these client events could be online, like we host a lot of, this is an online event, bring different people together, so you can do that. And these online events are very, 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 very successful. You talk to any of the top guys. I get to speak to quite a bit of advisors locally and offshore. And the offshore guys specifically are saying, like, you know what, webinars. We still do webinars and we still get a lot of responses. That's how we build our business. So don't underestimate client events from that point of view. But be very clear around those. So I think that's sort of from a networking point of view is really important. We've got to keep on like one of our goals, for example, is to grow our reach all the time, because more and more people need to know about what it is that we do, or at least know that we exist. And I think it's the same thing for any business. Like, that can't stop. You know, you can say, I only wanted 200 clients, I want to look after 50 families, or I want to, whatever that goal was. But ultimately, you can't really ever stop, right? You've got to grow that. So not to say you've got to grow to 1 million people, but you definitely need to continue growing, because ultimately people are going to leave, pass away, whatever the case may be. So we need to grow that reach. But also, the more you grow your reach, the closer you get to that ideal client. So for those of you who are not feeling like you're really working with your ideal client, I want to talk about that as well. That's something you definitely need to think about. Then, excuse me, like, this is still the one thing, and I think we actually pass these days, by the way. So I'm not a big referral fan, or let me say this, asking for referrals is not my forte, and it's never been a favorite strategy of mine. But this is, again, you know, the mother of invention is necessity, I guess. How does that saying go? But I have to ask for referrals when I get going. When times are tough, I have to ask for referrals. So you have to do what needs to be done in order to generate revenue, or in order to get clients to see, right? So nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. But long term, referrals for me is something that we need to be intentional. I'm much more of an advocacy person. I really love where clients become advocates. And that means that they go out and they tell other people about us on their own accord without us asking them. That's what an advocate is. So this is somebody that when they see somebody in a Facebook group saying, yes, like, I'm really struggling with this. No, you got to talk to Francois. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. That's advocacy, right? So that's very, very important. But you could, from that professional network that you were building, if it gets to a point where you both are comfortable in order to work together, you can then obviously enter into some form of an arrangement or agreement. But two things, there has to be a formal arrangement, and money must flow. I can tell you now, in a professional relationship, if money doesn't flow, nobody does anything. We've seen this over and over and over again. So there's got to be some form of reciprocation in that sense. Again, I think you need a strategy for how you, or at least a plan or a structure for how you ask for referrals, if you do ask for that and if you are comfortable with that. So, you know, it shouldn't be... I also think about where you are with your relationship with your client. You know, if I just met you and we've seen each other now 3 times, and we you onboard me as a client and we implement my plan, and then immediately after, so anybody like you might also benefit from our services. I think it sometimes comes across a little bit needy. But again, so I'm going to backtrack on that statement, because sometimes if that's your option, that's what you do. But that shouldn't be a long-term strategy. So I think when we are more intentional with some of the other stuff that I'm going to show you, you won't need to ask for referrals anymore. And I also think that the reason why so many, like every single advisor that I have conversations with, if I tell them what's your number one client acquisition strategy, they say referrals. We just work on the referrals. We can't keep up. We just keep getting referrals. But I think it's just because we're not intentionally doing anything else. That's a big reason why that is happening. Obviously, digital marketing is a big one as well. You have to build an online presence today. And I'm going to talk about AI a little bit later, something I added just before we started. Okay, let me put this in here because we have to talk about AI. But building an online presence is crucial for showing up in different places. And when people start looking at whether you are the real deal or not, if they can't find you online, they're not going to go like, yes, I like this guy. This guy really loves his privacy, and that's the kind of person I want to work with. I think people are like, I can't find this guy anyway. Is he even for real? So we have to build an online presence. Social media is one of the avenues where we get to distribute our messages, where we get to distribute and share our content, where we can market for free if we wanted to, and reach more people in different places than what we ever did before. But it's not the only strategy. It's one of the distribution channels, right? So your email is still a thing. A WhatsApp is still a thing. You know, okay, not in this country, but but theoretically, mail would still be an option. I know overseas they still love sending like paper newsletters, for example. So they would literally print them out and have them mailed to people's houses. That will not work here. But some of those things are really, really important. And then something that I started, we're spending quite a bit of money on this at the moment, is SEO, so search engine optimization. And there's a big reason for it. When you see somebody searching for Francois du Toit, well, there's going to be some reverend or pastor or somebody that's going to come up. There's a rugby player, there's an architect, there's a cyclist, and who was the other one? There's another one that come up, right? So nobody knows whether it's me. As soon as you put in CFP, then I'm the guy that shows up. If you say Francois du Toit propulsion, I'm up. If you just say propulsion, it is Uncle Elon, and it is NASA, and it's all those people that show up. So getting your SEO right when somebody searches for you is important, but it's more important to get SEO. So SEO is search engine optimization. It's so that when somebody searches for you, that they can find you, whether it's a Google or Bing or wherever. But it also means that more importantly, that if somebody starts searching for someone like you, because it's easy to, if I go and I look in the old telephone book and I had to go and look for Francois du Toit, I'll find Francois. There might be 5, but I'll find the Francois du Toit and I can see which one it is that I'm looking for. But if I'm looking for a financial advisor, I used to go to the yellow pages at the back. Some of you won't know what I'm talking about. Go to the yellow pages at the back and then go through all the financial. Okay, here's one, there's one, there's one, there's one. And that's when you want to show up. So are you in the yellow pages online, basically, when somebody says, I'm looking for a financial advisor? So that's very important. So SEO is really, really important. The content we create and put on our websites are very, very important. Even more so with AI, and I'll share more about that later. But anyway, so also then the other thing that you could do, or somebody in your team could do this if you've got a team, is to be part of online forums or discussion groups or things like that where you participate, right? So join a medical professional, some group where you can also add to the conversation. Let's say, for example, you want to work with medical professionals. It doesn't help us writing for Citywire, okay? It doesn't help at all because you're writing for other financial planners. What does help is that when you write for a medical publication that the doctor is actually reading that you want to work with, right? So I'm not saying it's not useful being on Citywire. I'm just using Citywire as an example. I saw Eleanor's here. So for example, you could write for MoneyWeb, which is maybe a thing that's more for consumers. I don't know. But I still don't get why advisors would want to write for advisors. That doesn't make sense at all to me. You want to write for your target market, and then you've got to connect with that target market online. You've got to be in their publications, in their forums, that's how you get in front of them. That's how you build awareness around the fact that you exist. So very important. All right. The other thing, we're always so focused on finding new clients and bringing in new clients all the time, but we forget about our existing clients. And our existing clients are a really powerful source of, or powerful source for building our practice. If you think about hunting versus farming, right? Hunting is what we do initially, and then hopefully over time we start farming a little bit more. But hunting is really for new clients, and farming is obviously for existing clients. So getting the client in and then doing more business with them would be a much better strategy than just bringing on 1,000 new clients. But there's a massive energy trade-off between the two. So hunting takes a lot more energy than farming does. Hunting gives you very quick results. Farming gives you long-term results. So I don't know, if I'm building a business, I want long-term results. So those things are really, really important. Finding opportunities, I think if you think about your clients, we don't want to be transaction focused. We want to be focused on a journey. And we need to explain this journey to our clients. Say, look, we're not going to do everything in one go. We're going to do this, then the next part is this, and then we sort of take you, here's the different milestones that we want to get to. And it's a journey with the client. And we can either decide that we want to get more of the same, okay, or we can say, well, I want to get something else, and that's perfectly fine. So we need to just think about, what is it that we're looking for? So, for example, if I focus on investments, do I just want to do more investments for my client? Or do I also now want to do their estate planning? Do I also want to do maybe bring some other things into the fold? So those things are really important as well. And that only you can answer. I think I at the moment, I'm experiencing a lot of expectations from a point of that advisors are just looking for plug and play. They don't want to do the work. They just want to want to just give it to me. I just want to use it. Like, I'm not going to put in any thought into it. I'm not going to go through my own process. I'm not going to say, what is it that I really want? Nobody wants to do the work because we're under so much pressure. There's a reason for it. We're under so much pressure that, you know, I just can't spend time on this. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. But this is important, right? There's thought that needs to go into this stuff, and then say, well, I have to be intentional with what I want to do and where I want to go. This is the sort of getting to that second curve for the business, right? The way for us to build our businesses, and we sit in a unique position where we are probably in the industry and the profession that where it's the easiest to build recurring revenue. But you need to build a predictable recurring revenue stream. If you're still relying on just once-off fees and things like that, and I'm maybe talking to an audience that's very much into investment, so you understand this. But it is really, really important. So I'm still going to say it, rather say it and not having to say it than not say it, and I maybe should have. But when you have recurring revenue, it is the foundation for everything. This is the thing that gives you the time to go and develop yourself professionally and personally, because there is recurring revenue, not starting from zero every single month. So we want to start building this recurring revenue as soon as possible. It's not always possible from day one, but at some point it becomes easier and easier and easier to do this. And more of the things that we do, we can say, rather give me as and when commission, rather pay me this or that, whatever that may be. But it helps you to plan a lot better, obviously, because you know what's coming in next month. I know that if I'm going away for a week, in fact, I can go away for a week because I know, we will be fine next month. Most people go away for a week, and then 6 weeks later, that slump, that week that they didn't work, catches up with them. So it catches you somewhere. It's never immediate, but it does catch you. Whereas when you have ongoing revenue and recurring revenue, you don't have that. So it obviously takes away a lot of the stress as well. So some strategies, or maybe, I don't know, whether it's strategies or whether it's, sort of options for you to do. And you'll see here, there's quite an interesting thing if we think about recurring revenue in a broader sense than just, product focused. So subscriptions, retainers, project fees, hourly fees, flat fees, all of those things. I mean, subscriptions and retainers are probably the two ones that are the easiest to understand from a fee point of view. Retainers isn't something that I really enjoy. I think a subscription or just a monthly fee, that we don't need to label it that much. But if you say, well, you know what, this is the work we're going to do, and for us to do that, it's going to cost you so much per month, and whatever agreement you put in place with that is that. Now, we are fortunate to work with a couple of advisors who are fee-only businesses. So they do not take any form of other fees other than invoicing clients. And it's really fascinating to see what clients are willing to pay for. It's fascinating to see how much they are willing to pay for these things. It's really, I think a lot of the barriers to this is our own. Like we say, because I won't pay that, because we've been known that things are paid by via the product. So I wouldn't pay. It's almost like a builder or a construction person. I know when we renovated back in Krugersdorp, this guy was like, no, I wouldn't do this, I wouldn't do that. Yeah, because you know that it doesn't really cost anything, but it's costing me a lot of money because I don't have the ability to do this myself. So that's why you wouldn't do this. But it's our own biases and our own barriers to being open-minded that really keeps us from saying, but would a client be interested in something like that? Maybe there's a whole different market that you could also bring in. And again, I just want to stretch here that when you're building recurring revenue, this is absolutely not about replacing things. This is adding to your toolkit, right? So this is where you can have an option for clients who doesn't want to pay commissions, or they don't need a product, but you need to do work for them, kinds of things. So this becomes one of the options. When you go and buy a laptop, you can pay for it cash, you can finance it, you can put it on your credit card and budget it for however long. So it's still about, you're still getting the laptop, right? And for different people, they value different things. So some people would say, no, I just want to pay a fee, I don't need all the other things. Or other people say, I'm not going to pay you fees. And then you can say, okay, but we can take it via the product. So neither is right or wrong. It's more about saying, well, what are the options that I'm giving my client, the client that I want to work with, how they can pay for what it is that they need, because different people have different things. So think about people who don't have any investable assets, or they're starting off now and they are paying for certain things, or they're starting to invest, but I mean, you're not making any money off of it. So for a very long time, it's a loss leader for someday when we build our assets. But there's different ways of going about this. So you got to go sit and think about these things. So subscriptions are something that will be on an ongoing basis. I would just call it a monthly fee or an annual fee. Retainers means that I pay you an amount and then you owe me something in return for that. It's different from that. So it's almost like, oh, but if I didn't use it this month, I'm losing. So you don't want somebody to have that mindset. Project fees, we use this a lot when I built my practice. We would charge for the advice, so the planning part and all of that. There was a fee for that, once-off fee, and that's it, right? So if you maybe have to fix things for people, you have to review things, you maybe have to give a second opinion about something, a project fee kind of setup would be great. Hourly fees. We interviewed a guy from America who's built a massive business purely on hourly fees, but they do charge proper hourly fees. It's fascinating. And he wrote a whole book about that. So that's also possible. A lot of people say never go hourly because then your time is, but if you price it right, it might still work. And then of course, assets under management and as and when fees and things like that. We all know that. It's not only about having recurring revenue. You also need it to be diversified. Now, you don't just want one source of income from one thing or from one place. You do want to make sure that you get this from different places. I'm a big proponent of using ComSpace. ComSpace gives you insights into your revenue like nothing else can. Even if you just work for one product provider, for example, you only deal with one product provider. We think like, but I do get my commission statement. There's no insights, there's no understanding, there's nothing that you can really see from that apart from doing a lot of work in Excel or somewhere in order to have those views. Whereas a tool like that makes it so easy to understand exactly where your money is coming from, where your risks are, all sorts of things. It helps you quite a bit. I think there is a recording available on with Amity where I chatted to Tanya back in the day about what was it called? Client segmentation. There you go. So client segmentation and things, and these kinds of insights are really important from that point of view. So we had an in-depth discussion about that. But it's really important. So the more you can diversify your revenue, the less risk there is. And it's really about negating that risk and making it more predictable as well. Then a big mind shift we need to make is to not think about the product as an income source, but rather your client. So what are you earning on a per client basis or per family basis or a per couple basis, or however you've put together your business? What am I earning per client? And then what am I earning from that client? How is that made up? Where's my risk? That kind of stuff. Am I earning 80% of my revenue from people who are like 85 plus? That's a massive risk. You might be 60, you might be 50, but you inherited this book where there's maybe a lot of older clients, and then there's a massive risk in that. And unless we know these things and we see that from our revenue, we're not going to be able to take appropriate action. So that's just really, really crucial and important as well. All right. So marketing. I spoke about you need an online presence, right? So I'm not really going to stand still on this, but the most beautiful thing about this, apart from the fact that it's a long-term strategy, it's something that works well. It works when you are sleeping and when you're on holiday, this is still working. But for me, what I experience is that this becomes an attraction mechanism instead of being a hunting mechanism. So where I had to go out and find people, I always tell the story about when we had an internet franchise way back in the day. I still advertised in a newspaper, the regional newspaper. The newspaper went everywhere. It's almost like the Huisgenoot. It goes everywhere and everybody reads. You never know who picks it up and where it lands up or anything like that. And you hope that somebody would call you. And, what we had in that instance was like the 3 calls we got were from other newspapers who wanted us to advertise with them. So they didn't reach our target market at all. But through online, what we found is that you quickly filter out the people that don't resonate with what you're saying or how you're saying it. You quickly get people to say, yes, I like this. I want to know more. I want to know more. I want to know more. And they have the ability to go and look at a lot of stuff from you in a very short space of time. And that then means that we start to attract the right clients and almost filter out the ones that we shouldn't be. So think about doing cold calling one-on-one. You got to phone 10 people to find the one that's willing to speak to you. But online, that happens automatically, basically. And that's the same thing with webinars. Something like this, there's some of you who loves what I'm saying and some of you go like, this guy. And that's perfectly fine, because I don't have to talk to every single person on here to find out who the 5 people is who like me and who the 5 people are that don't resonate with what I'm saying. And that's the power of this. But also, anything that we do online becomes an asset. It lives long beyond us, and it just keeps working, right? So you also need to look at these things as assets. So really, really important. I had a fascinating conversation yesterday with Brian Foster, and we were talking about this whole thing around, when there's certain things that are, let's say, published, and we don't agree with what's being said. We say this a lot when there's somebody who answers a question on MoneyWeb, for example, and then, some advisors will share that and go like, oh, this is bad advice, wada. But instead of like having this massive opportunity to just put your voice to it and say, this is an interesting article and an interesting take on it, here's our take. So you're not discrediting the person who wrote the article or the thing in the first place. You are using one of the most powerful ways to distinguish yourself from your competitors by contrasting yourself to that. And those things are really powerful. And all of this then plays into your brand. So if you want to stand out, this is really important. So just some ideas around what you can do. Obviously, a professional website is really still important in my mind. Profile me, talk about referrals, advocacy, those kinds of things. The challenge with referrals and advocacy is that we don't always show up in the same way. So when Marius refers me to someone and Ingrid refers me to someone and the next person refers me, they all do it in their own way. So I never show up consistently in the same manner. But with something like a Profile Me, you can say, well, to your clients, whenever you refer me, please just share this with the client. Then you always show up in the same way. So those things are really powerful. So if you're intentional and strategic about it, it really works well. Your social media profiles, obviously. And you don't need to be everywhere. Please don't be everywhere. Be where your clients are. It's a very simple thing. And if you don't know where they are, we need to ask them, like, where do you spend your time? Where would you like to learn more about financial planning and that? Which platform do you prefer to learn that? That's where you need to be. Not because TikTok serves your video to every single person on there. If your clients are not there, you're wasting your time. You might pick up other people, and you've got to be, responding to comments that people have got nothing better to do than be nasty to you. So be clear around where your ideal clients are. What are doctors doing when they are in theater? Okay, I don't know. They have some interesting conversations. Anyway, so content. I can't stress that enough. We have a YouTube channel and I'm on LinkedIn. Those are the only 2 places where you will find me. I am on Instagram and those places, but I'm not as active there. But the content, and the beauty is how easy it is for us to repurpose that content. Once I've created something, which is typically happens on the YouTube channel first, then we do lots of other stuff with that very quickly as well. So it means one asset that I created are being repurposed in many different ways. So content is really important, but now also content is very important from search engine optimization point of view. So when people search for someone like you, or they search about a problem they have, if you are the person who wrote about that problem and spoke about that problem, that makes a massive difference. And they say, yes, this person, this is how they get to know you. So that's why we need to create that content. And don't feel like you're behind, right? That's probably the biggest danger now. Is like, oh, but Francois, yes, I'm so far behind. No, you're not. So, and then also from an AI point of view, it's even more important. So really important. Positive online reviews. This is something we started I don't really care. You can't just have 5-star reviews because that's not realistic, right? So hopefully somebody gives you a 3 somewhere and a 4 and a 1, and you get an opportunity to respond to that. That's fine. Don't try and delete those. Those are perfectly fine. It shows that, and people also know, have you ever gone on to Takealot and you want to buy something, you read the reviews, you look at there's some great reviews, but let me look at the bad ones. And you click on the 1-star reviews and people go, oh my word, like you can see who's the problem. Yeah, it wasn't the product. It's the person writing the review is the problem. So they give themselves away. So don't feel bad about those things. It's how you respond and how you show up in those things, because that's an opportunity, right, to set things right. So those are really important. Okay. So we think about content marketing, think about problems. What problems do you solve? Don't think that, but I can find out how vehicle finance works by just typing it into Google. You haven't explained from your point of view how that works. What happens when you buy your first home? What happens when you decide, am I going to get a study loan or not? What about my retirement? How do I need to think about this? Like all those kinds of things are problems that people have. People don't get up in the morning and say, I wonder which retirement annuity I should get. That's not what they do. They get up and say, yes, you know what, my mom and dad, we need to look after them. I don't want to be in that position where my children need to look after me. I need to think about my retirement, but I don't even know what my retirement is going to look like. So those are the kinds of problems that you want to write about or create content about and things like that. And here's the funny thing. You don't need to be on camera, okay? You could just have a video with like text and things coming up on the screen and a voiceover of that. I do strongly believe that you should be on camera, because the relationship you build by looking people in the eye like this is absolutely incredible. You won't believe. I can tell you plenty of stories how every time I'm really amazed when that happens. How I realize that this has happened, and people don't even know me from a bar of soap. So some effective strategies. So just be very clear around this, right? See, we're running out of time quite quickly. So your target market consists of two aspects here. On the one hand is what they do. This is the things that we typically know: their income, their job, where they live, how much money they have, their assets, liabilities, income, expenses. All that stuff sits on the what they do part. So we can very easily identify whether we want to work with those people. But then my big question is always, but all the people that tick those boxes your ideal client? And some people go, yeah, yes. I'm going, no, they're not. Because there's the second filter that you need to go through, and that is who they are. So you can have two people with lots of money. The one is a absolute song to work with, and the other one is absolutely excruciating. I mean, you just want to leave the industry because of that person. So which one's your ideal client, right? It's not only the one who ticks the boxes, it's also the one who it's really easy to work with them. Maybe you feel energized, maybe you just feel a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment when you work with those people. You're happy to answer their calls when they phone you. Those are the kinds of people. That's the who they are part. And there's too many, like you've got lots of ideal clients in the what they do in your practice at the moment, but you need to go sit down and write down and say, who are the clients I love to work with the most? Who are the clients that I really like working with the least? And go and look at those traits between those two. What is it that makes the one nice and the other one not, if I can put it that bluntly? And then you need to have a strategy to get rid of those ones that you don't enjoy. It doesn't matter how much income they bring you. You need to have a strategy for that. And we sort of designed a part of our program that we run to sort of help with how you fire clients in a good professional way. But really important. It's important also that you know exactly who you are talking to, because if I just talk in general, if I stand in a Woolies queue to pay and I'm talking, some people are going to think I'm mad. Like I'm not, and also people are probably not going to listen. But if I tap the person in front of me on the shoulder and I speak to them directly, or I see somebody I know and I mention their name, if I go, hello, Ben, then Ben goes like, yeah, hello, Dada, and they listen because they heard their name. So it's exactly the same with our marketing. So we often think that when we say you need to niche or you need to do that, you could have multiple niches in your business. But when you do marketing, you want to speak to one niche at a time. You don't want to try and reach everybody in the same way. So that's really, really, really key as well. Okay, so I'm gonna skip that one. WhatsApp marketing works well because it helps you stay top of mind. People read those things. I think it's like 80% of people within 5 minutes have opened their WhatsApp messages. I skip emails, but I really ever skip WhatsApp messages. Also, it does help you a lot with your personal brand building and also just creating awareness, because there's ways that we can use WhatsApp that is not invasive. It's non-invasive. So things like using your status updates. People who want to look at it will look at it. People who don't want to look at it don't look at it. And if WhatsApp doesn't show it to someone, they don't show it to someone. But you're not sending them a message and I've got to see what Francois sent me. But we use WhatsApp marketing. We've been using it now since 2020 actively, and it's been fantastic. There's other people that we work with who also, they share weekly messages, or when there's things like with Trump and all of that they send out messages and they try and be proactive in terms of managing how people react to the markets. They use it to educate people all the time. So you don't want to be sending a daily message, but you definitely want to be saying, well, once a week, once a month, whatever it is, or when there's important information, you're able to communicate with them quite quickly. So I'm not going to go into the technicalities. Razan and I do like a whole thing around WhatsApp marketing, which is quite powerful. Email marketing. This is the only thing you own is your email list. The one email that people will open is if they send them a consolidated report of their investments. I can promise you now, and not all your clients will have investments with you, but that's probably the thing. A lot of people tell me when I say, you know what, you should be sending monthly reports with your clients' investments. They go like, but they should actually never look at their investments. Well, it's a great way to stay top of mind. I've seen this in practice so many times where they reply, I'm so glad I've been meaning to contact you, blah, 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 blah. Here's the thing, do this, we want to do that. It also builds trust to say, well, we look at this monthly. Like, don't you worry, we've got our finger on the pulse here. We will talk to you when there's a thing. It also gives you the opportunity to educate as you go. But more importantly is that you stay top of mind. All of this stuff you'll see is just stay top of mind. Just stay top of mind. Remind people you want to be there, or they need to think about you when they want to do anything with their money, right? But if they never hear from us, then they're not going to respond to us. I also spoke about that, right? So let's talk about. I know, like, I feel I'll get to some. I don't know if there is any questions. I'll have a look now. But the other opportunity that's there for you, if you really want to revitalize your practice, is to think about, and just by the way, just before I go into this, if you look at the things I already spoke about, a lot of those things are taking you back to the basics. And the question that I want us all to ask, and I do this all the time in my business, is to say, are we doing the basics well? Because if I'm not doing the basics well, nothing else is going to work. We so in a era where we chase the new shiny thing. And that's not the thing that works. It is doing the basics consistently well. The thing that you can do is up the frequency of that. So instead of doing it once a month, you can do it once a week. Instead of doing it once a week, you can do it twice a week. So that also brings better results. So it's not to say I've got to do like new things. It's just the things I'm doing, I maybe just need to up the frequency of that. So that's also just something to think about. Okay, so my most wonderful thing, I think this whole session could just have been about this, but technology is you can't do business without technology anymore. And when you invest into technology, and it is an investment, right? It's not an expense. If you see your technology, whatever you pay for that, as an expense, there's something seriously wrong. The right technology is a massive investment. So that's the one thing. The second thing is that too often we see technology as something that we need to have so that we can, I don't know, do our compliance, or I need to have a CRM because I've got to store the email address somewhere. And that's not really the purpose of technology. So we need to also start thinking about technology as an income generating tool. So think about certain things like TaxBase, for example, is one of our tools. And TaxBase is something that we have users charging people a lot of money for. It costs them like very little a month, but they charge people a lot of money because the value that it produces is a lot. Think about the financial plans, not F&A so much, but cash flow financial planning. If you do that, that is such a valuable piece of work that you produce, and something that you could charge for. It's something that you could just do that and nothing else, probably. Okay. But technology is there. It's a tool that we use. It's like a carpenter that needs a hammer and a saw and whatever in order to build a cabinet for which he can charge. Like, that's it. So it is a tool. Without that tool, we don't have a business. So some of the tools that a lot of you are using probably, and there will things be missing. Yeah, and I'll be keen. Like if you use anything other, I'll show you another list just now, but If you use something that's not on screen, put it in the chat. I'll be really keen to know what you use. But these are sort of what I term to be end-to-end solutions. So these are solutions that were purpose-built for financial planning businesses, and the CRMs were built for that. The planning tools that come with it is built for that, and some integrations and things are built specifically for financial planning businesses. So At Work is probably the most well-known, most used one. Advice Tech is new and up and coming, and they're really making some good waves. Avalon, them Elite Wealth, Xplan, these people have been around for a long time, and a lot of you are using it. Now, I get this question all the time, Francois, which CRM is the best? I'm like, okay, which one are you using? No, I'm using Avalon. I'm saying Avalon's the best. I'm using At Work. At Work is the best. The best CRM out there is the one you have at the moment, because you already have a lot of data on there, hopefully. The thing that's missing is that we're not using it properly. We haven't spent the time to get to know everything it can do, nor did we sit and learn how to do them. And the most important thing that we never do is to look at what are the problems I'm experiencing in my business, taking those problems and saying, well, which of my technology stack, which parts of my technology can maybe solve this? And then you need to go and talk to that provider. So you need to go to At Work and say, At Work, how does your system solve this problem for me? Show me. But what we mostly do is we look at it from the other way is, okay, At Work, show me what you can do. And then I try and figure out how I can use it in my business. You should already know the problems, right? So yes, I can't communicate with my clients. I don't have good record keeping. I don't have a way to automate certain things. I wonder if At Work has got some of these things that they can do. Then you go to them and say, show me these 3 things, how you do them. And then you go like, oh, wow, I didn't even know that. And that goes for any of the tools on the screen at the moment. So we don't think about our businesses enough in order to identify the problems, understand the problems, and then go and look for solutions. There's all these solutions out there, and then we want to see how we can use them to solve our problems. So let me quickly talk about AI. So AI, for me, for those of you, some of you are new to this, some of you have been using AI probably, and then anything in between. But for me, there's a process if you want to get started with AI. So the first thing is that you need to understand what AI is and what it isn't. But then you need to learn how to talk to it. You need to be able to communicate with it if you want to get the most out of it. People who criticize AI a lot of the time doesn't know how to talk to AI. I can tell you that. So how to prompt. So we talk about prompting. That's very important. Then you got to know what do the different tools do. So just think about the big ones. So ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, those kinds of ones, Perplexity, DeepSeek, those ones. What do they do? When do I use? Do I only need one? Do I need all of them? Which ones do I need? But again, we need to understand what's possible. And then we need to again understand what are the challenges that I have in my business where I can really take one of these tools or a couple of these tools and build a tool that I can use that works off of my knowledge, that always does what I wanted to do, and it's consistent in the way that it does that. That's the custom GPT part. So that top line part, I believe every single financial advisor and planner and their team should learn. They should become proficient in that. That's what they need to do. Then the sort of below the line stuff is sort of next level. But this is now where we start looking at the business and understanding okay, so how can I now use this? So when we say building AI workflows, that's sort of saying, well, I've picked a few tools. When do I use which tool in which combination? So that would be an AI workflow, really, what we're probably talking about. But then it's adding automation. And automation isn't necessarily AI. Okay, automation can include AI, but AI isn't necessarily automation. AI often helps to build automations or to suggest automations or to even review automations, but it's not the automation itself. And automation is something that you want to be able, it's a recipe, step 1, step 2, step 3, and we do it, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 1, step 2, like all the time. Then you get AI agents, where a lot of the focus has gone to in the last bit. But that is now something that goes off. You give a piece of work to the AI and it says, okay, so I'm going to send it to that agent and that agent and that agent to do different things. And when it comes back, I'm going to see what happened. I'm going to make another decision. And that AI agent runs on its own. That's the intention. That's when we really talk about AI agents. It's an AI that can make decisions and be autonomous and do its own thing until there's a desired result. Okay, so that's what that does. So the things below the line, I believe, is a little bit more tricky, and sometimes specialization is required there. But at the top, there's no excuse for anybody not to work on that. So if you want to start with AI, that's where you need to start. You, your team, whoever. So when we talk about AI chatbots, I'm not talking about the chatbot on your website. Okay, I'm talking about the major large language models that exist. So we've got ChatGPT, we've got Claude, Copilot, Grok, Gemini, Mistral. So there's a whole bunch of them, and you always see these in the news. And each of them are actually good at something, etc. But you need to learn and understand what those are. When we want to do research, yes, I use research a lot. Actually, there's one missing from the research one that I need to add. Although Perplexity isn't really seen as an AI chatbot, it's more of an AI search, but that actually also needs to come on there. But then for reasoning, you want to reason something out, it's more complex. There's certain things you'd use for that. And then you get these things called aggregates. And aggregates are just, well, it's one portal and you can access any of these tools sort of in one place. Okay. This is not important. I just want to show you like those are the main tools. And then you get like, if we start thinking about tools, because this is the question I get most of the time is like, but Francois, what tool? But nobody wants to learn the prompting and what the tools do and what the problems are and how we will solve them. Again, nobody wants to do the work. Just tell me what tools, right? So we started putting together some tools that's easy to implement and that anybody can really use to help. And there's two ones that really stand out for me. The one is the meeting notes. That's the biggest, easiest problem that anybody can solve. We even built custom GPTs for those, but you get these tools that you can buy off the shelf that integrates and can record your meetings and transcribe them and summarize them and all those kinds of things. So there's lots of, we want to talk about that, but also, keeping note of things. If you think about the amount of things you see or PDFs that you receive, like what do we do with those? So Recall is a fantastic tool that would actually summarize it for you, and you can always you tag it, and then you can start referring back to it. So when I want to learn more about a specific topic, I can go into Recall and see what are all the things that I saved that's related to this particular topic, and I can then use that in a very simple manner. So it's really brilliant. But the visuals are really something that has the new ChatGPT. I mean, you've all seen the action figures and things, but there's fantastic things that I've done on ChatGPT with its new image generation capability. So that's a latest edition. But I mean, we can really create phenomenal images and things that doesn't really look AI like they did in the beginning. But these are kinds of of some of the tools that we suggest advisors look at. But again, you need to know what's the problem that you want to solve. Otherwise, that doesn't help. These are all the use cases. I'm not going to go through them. I don't have time. But these are all the use cases that we've identified so far where we are already using AI. And we talk about AI. When I say AI, we talk about generative AI. So it's the ChatGPT and those kinds of things. But there's lots of things that we already use this for and that we show people how to do some of this stuff. But if you're not, the whole basis here is that if you're not using AI, you're spending unnecessary time on tasks that could have been done a lot quicker with the help of this. So AI is not the golden bullet or the silver bullet or whatever bullet. It is a tool that gets things done faster than you could ever believe is possible. So you've got to use that to your advantage. But again, you need the skills to get the most out of it. So I'm still gonna harp on that. And Ingrid, I will share this with you afterwards. So there is like a summary of the AI tools, and then there's a summary of the tech tools that we sort of stand behind and say, well, these are things that people can. So you can see on the left-hand side, there are many different aspects in our businesses, and then the different tools that we think, you could definitely have a look at. But again, going through these things it gives you a starting point, but I do want to urge you've got to understand what are the bottlenecks, the problems in your business from a business point of view that you're trying to solve. And then what is the experience you're trying to create for the client? And then when you look at that, then you can say, okay, so these are the problems. Then you can go to these tech providers and say, you know what, show me how you solve this. So if you have an issue with your financial management, for example, Go and see it, understand like, oh, we need to do invoicing. Other people don't need to do invoicing, so that doesn't become an issue. For us, that was a massive thing. We needed to automate all of that. So we needed a provider with whom we could integrate from that point of view in order to automate. So in other words, otherwise people would just say, I just create the invoice on Word. I don't need a whole accounting system, for example, or something that could generate invoices. So you've got to understand what you're trying to do, and then the experience you're trying to create. I think on the one hand for clients, but also for your staff, right? So don't forget about that as well. But you can see there's lots of tech available and things that you could use. Okay, the last thing I want to say about this, or I know a couple of minutes over time, but our mindset around what technology is and what it isn't is really, 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 really important. And the bottom line of this is two things. It is not the thing. It is a tool. That's it. It is not the value proposition. Even if you say I'm a digital only advisor, it's still the tool that makes that possible. You are still, sort of the person delivering. And secondly of all, the value proposition is not the tech. The value proposition is great financial planning that's convenient to you, that you can access whenever it suits you or from wherever it suits you as a client. And you can do everything digitally. We never send you a piece of paper. We never ask you to print anything out. Like, that's being digital, right? But you need the tools to make that possible. So that's all that technology is. And then the biggest thing is it's not an expense, it's an investment. But you got to get into the right tech. Okay, so quick wins. You can take a picture of this if you want to. AI is a massive win. It helps speed up a lot of things, right? But again, first learn to drive the car. Don't just jump into the car. Virtual meetings, bookings is something that you can have quick wins with. Instead of trying somebody to align diaries, just do it virtually. Use something like Calendly. Onboarding forms. If you can use digital online forms, it makes a lot of things possible. But not only that, even if you do nothing with that, it cuts out a lot of the mistakes as a result. Quick parts, something that's sort of falling away in Outlook, unfortunately, at the moment, if you use new Outlook. But quick parts were like little templates that you could put in. They were quite powerful. Merge docs, specifically like at work does merge docs. So you can pull information from your CRM into a document, and then the document is pre-filled with the client's details, etc. So other CRMs can do that as well. If you're not using something like Quickly Sign, like, you've got to look at e-signatures, and then also at the very least stop typing things and see how you can set up things so that you can maybe import data. So maybe export it from your CRM and import it somewhere else. It saves a lot of time, even if that's not automated. All right, so that was a lot of stuff in a very short space of time. I'm 5 minutes over. So let me just see, where is the screen? I don't know if there is any questions, or there are any questions rather. Oh, there's a Q&A, so let me see. Thanks, Eleanor. So let me see what Eleanor said. Just for clarity, advisors writing content to Citywire articles to improve professionalism in the industry and help other advisors improve their advice and business strategy, giving back to the profession. If the industry advances in terms of giving quality advice and moves away from product push, all advisors benefit. I fully agree. I think my point is this. So it is necessary, right? But ultimately, you're not going to find clients there. So you do it for exactly that, because we want to improve the profession and we want to lift all boats, right? But you're not going to find clients there. I think that was the point I was trying to make. So thanks, Eleanor, for that as well. Ingrid, that's it. I don't know if there's anything else.
No, thank you so much, Francois. It was a lot of information for 1 hour, and I really encourage everybody to go check Propulsion to get a deeper understanding of everything. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for everybody who joined us. I hope you all have a good week and enjoy the public holidays next week.
Thanks very much.
Okay, bye.